All right, and we're live. Good evening, Shifties. Welcome back. Welcome back to Shift the Journey. I'm your host. My name is Tito Amogus. Shift the Journey is my passion project where I get to connect people where they can talk about their career journeys. So if anybody out there is like thinking about, hey, I think I want to make a shift in my career. I want to make a change. I want to try something new. I want to try something that maybe you want to try something that you've been researching, but you've never talked to anybody about it. Well, here's your chance to hear about how somebody else does it. Maybe I can't, we always talk about like we can't provide you a blueprint of how to get from one career to another career or how to get, from one state to another state, whatever it is. But we can provide you evidence that it can be done and give you some info on like some of their life experiences. So I just to like reintroduce myself, I am a 20-year veteran of the U.S. Air Force. I retired back in 2015. I went to college briefly, where I met this man. Briefly. I didn't do so well. I enlisted in the Air Force 3 months shy of my 21st birthday. I retired 20 years later, and now I'm almost at the end of this year, I'll be 10 years into my second career, which is analytics consulting, and mostly focused on automation, some visualization, mostly just kicking butt, taking names, whole military thing. All right, so enough about me. Let's get into it with Eric. So Eric, I know where you're from. Can you tell the people where you originated? Where you from?
I'm originally from North County, San Diego, in Oceanside in Southern California.
Yeah.
Born and raised
Oh, you know
in
what?
SoCal.
That for some reason that just brought up a memory. We were talking earlier in the studio, everybody, where you when you took me to like hang out at your parents' house, you took me by the house that was in Top Gun, right? The first Top Gun, of course. At the time, it was the only Top Gun. Do you remember that? It was a house in Oceanside. You're like, oh, that's the house. I don't know. I don't know why I remember that. All right. Anyway, you're, you're like, uh-oh, you're frozen. I hope that's, uh-oh. Hang on. Hang on. We having technical difficulties. So anyway, yeah, he took me by, oh, all right, he'll be back. He'll be back. But he took me by so I was from Riverside. I am from Riverside, California. And we went to school together freshman year of college in Riverside, California, at La Sierra University. I did not last there. I ended up going to the Philippines for a year, kind of taking a gap year. Supposed to be going to school in the Philippines. Didn't work out. Then I came back and we hung out a little bit, but this dude, he took me by the house where he's like, "Oh, this house was in Top Gun." And it was the house where like it was Kelly McGillis was the she was like the romantic interest for Tom Cruise, in Top Gun. And then she lived in this house, and we went by, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, that is the house." Um, fun fact. Hopefully, he comes on soon. But like, fun fact. So he's Samoan, and I'm Filipino, and there it was funny because people always ask me if I was the Samoan one. He was the Filipino one because he's not a very big Samoan. And I still get that question. People still ask me that. I'm like, no, I'm actually not. I'm Filipino. And they're amazed. So, all right. So I'm trying to connect with him, see if we can get him back on here. He is Eric is a an HR training coordinator, and so if you look over his career journey, you can see that like he's had several stops where he was in some kind of training. But I really want to hear about that. I really want to hear about that. So we'll see what happens here in the next few minutes. Hang on, let me let me try to get at him again. Um, what is the world if we never have technical difficulties? I always tell people, so like, my in my job as an analytics consultant, oftentimes, most of the time, I'm not in the same room with my client when I'm presenting something to them, when I'm doing a demo for them. And a lot of times I don't um oh, I'll finish that story later. He's back. Hey,
Um,
I can't see you.
I'm in my car and my phone. He hold on.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So like,
Why can't you see me? Hold on.
I don't know, man. Keep working on that. I'm gonna tell a story. I'm gonna tell a story real quick. so,
Ugh.
uh, uh, most times, oh, okay. I'm not gonna tell a story. I'm gonna tell a story later. How
Oh,
about
here I
that?
am.
There you go. Oh, you're still like
It was an embarrassing
freezing up.
story about us. So
No, no.
okay.
Yeah, we're not going to talk about our embarrassing stories. However, um, we did. I remember I did learn something with you about you can fit 150 people into a two-bedroom apartment in a college town. Just,
Oh my god.
just okay, yeah.
That was like the
Stories.
best time ever, but yeah, it's definitely possible as we saw. Yeah.
Oh, the floor wasn't having it, man. Oh my gosh. All right. Hey, listen. So I was just talking about like your career journey, how like in a lot of stops that you've had, you've done like training and stuff. We're gonna get to that, but like you're saying, okay, so you're from Oceanside, and like I was telling everybody, I'm from Riverside, and we met going to La Sierra University, and I didn't last very long, and you stayed there. So, what was your major?
Right. I finished with anthropology sociology. And the reason why, well, I was interested in it because I think I had a longing to learn about my own culture, and that's why I ended up, I think, in American Samoa doing anthropology, doing digs, and it kind of worked out. That's when it was kind of a blessing in disguise because I was able to apply my education and join an anthropology department.
Oh man, you're like breaking up. So, you you took anthropologies so that you could like dig deeper into your culture, and so
The Diggers
after,
Master, I wanted to be a professor
yeah,
eventually and teach. Um, Went to American Samoa, ended up staying there, longer than I had anticipated. Uh, got a job there at their local college, doing anthropology, working in their anthropology department at the local college, where
yeah.
we got to do digs in ancient villages.
Oh,
Um, you know, and yeah, it was super cool. Um, Obviously, learning more about my genealogy, the
yeah.
Afalava clan, and just really taking a deep dive. However, you know, I had student loans. I had
Oh,
to,
yeah.
I had not planned on staying in American Samoa. The cost of living is very low. It still is like right now, the average family household is $10,000 a year. So
Oh my
imagine
gosh.
back in the 90s, 97, around that area. So, do the math. So obviously I was like, hey, I have to get back home. I need to find a not a real job, but a job that pays. I can't
Yeah.
afford this. And the loans are due. And that's kind of when I got into an HR related, industry, which I became a recruiter, and I was
Okay.
recruiting, like doing headhunting. That's kind of
Yeah.
like how I segue. So I started out, applying, my education, but there really isn't a lot of money unless you become, get a PhD and
Yeah.
teach, at a, professor level. And, great, passion, but I had to, get back to the States and, start paying bills. So that's how, I worked for this agency as a headhunter
Hmm.
and learned the process. It was sales recruiting. So we were hiring, entry level all the way up to, C level uh, sales professionals and
Hmm.
placing them in our various accounts. And everything was done over
Yeah.
the phone. But that's really where I learned the ABCs of business is learning how to negotiate, learning, the whole sales cycle and really getting people, on the phone, committed to you within those first 2 minutes. I
Hmm.
got really good at it. And so I was asked by my branch manager to help out with new hire onboarding.
Oh yeah.
She's like, "Hey, you're a good talker. You seem like you would be a good trainer. Why don't you go ahead and help out any of our new recruiters that come on board? You can kind of orientate them, kind of be their onboarding buddy, and get them acclimated, to and orientated to the way that we do things here." So that's
Yeah.
kind of like what catapulted me into this training field because
Yeah.
I I like to help people.
Hmm.
I was able to teach the process, and my branch manager gave me that opportunity, and so that's kind of like how and I like the whole HR field. It's
Yeah.
not like the thing with HR. It's not like you go to school like, and I want to be an HR manager. A lot of times HR professionals find themselves in this role. They just kind of fell into it, depending
Hmm.
on their skill set or opportunities or even their talent. I do like to speak in front of people.
Yeah.
I have no problem getting up in front. Growing up in church and my,
I
my
was gonna
parents being
say.
elders,
Yeah.
you already know.
Oh
And
yeah.
then,
I was
we
gonna
were,
say, man, like you grew up on stage, right? I grew up on stage. It's the same thing where like
it's just,
you got all these people and it just doesn't matter. It's just another day.
and you have to be able to, pivot and, at a moment's notice.
Right. Yeah.
So a lot of, I learned how to play piano starting at age 4. And then by age 14, I was the pianist and the organist at my church. So while
Mhm.
everyone else got to play and have fun, I had to be responsible and actually, play. You know what I mean? So
Oh yeah.
I look back at that and a lot of being, the exposure, being a performer, if you will, being performance based, that kind
Yeah.
of, that's how I fell into, human resources because we do talk about performance management.
Mhm. Yeah.
There are expectations that need to be communicated. Communication's key. So a lot of what I learned growing up in church, at La Sierra, I was, and also in high school at the academy, I was in choir.
Yeah.
So you had to be up on stage, and then being my family being a high, being Afalava, that is a high title in our village. You
Mhm.
had to make sure that you were always on point,
Yeah. Yeah,
um,
it's so
which can
interesting
be good and
because
bad. Yeah,
yeah, it's so interesting because I've talked to other musicians, people who
yeah,
um I've talked to a couple who like were in they were like concert violinists, somebody they did that for their job and so then they went into analytics, they went into consulting and it's like what would make somebody think that something like that would be transferable to something completely different and it's a lot of the things that you said where it's like performance based and then like you're comfortable in front of people, you're comfortable communicating and you take the things like my friend Ben, who was the concert violinist, and he was, went to Vanderbilt University in Nashville, and he's now in data science. And one of the things that he said that helped him cross over was his attention to detail. Is one, his attention to detail, tons of practice, tons of discipline, because in order to be the the top performer, you have to practice a lot. You have to pay attention to the little things. That is an eighth note. That is a 16th note. That is a whatever.
Exactly.
So and so yeah, I think the musical background, the arts background, a lot of times gets a I think it gets a bad rap for like people who like majored in that and they're like, oh yeah, you're never gonna make any money. But should you major in that and should you want to transition into another field, there's a lot that can take you there. And I myself, obviously, I'm also a musician. So yeah, very, very interesting.
Well,
Very interesting.
the hard work that goes into, let's just talk about, piano. I had to practice a minimum of 2 hours a day. So from age 4, you know, just building that uh, being focused and dedicated.
Hmm.
Um, and then obviously I had to do it. That was the expectation that my parents had. Like, hey, we're paying for your piano lessons because you asked for it. Um, and then we can talk about talent, but talent alone, you do still have to do the work.
Oh yeah.
And I find that in my career path, I still worked hard and I still practiced, if you will. You still
Yeah.
need to have, you still need to practice. So even when I learn a new, like in my, right now I work for Skechers and I'm on the learning and development team. When I learn a new class, I still get my nerves, even though I'm comfortable standing up in front. But if I have a room filled of VP level executives, and we're going to talk about decision making
Hmm.
and the tools of to make you a successful decision maker, I still need to practice and make sure that as I'm going through my slide deck, as I'm hitting if I'm landing on every point, to make sure when they walk away out of this 2 hour class or 2.5 hour class, like, one, it was engaging, two, that they're going to be able to apply it and understand it and apply it to this warehouse distribution center, fast paced, high level, environment. So even though, I do want to note that, to the audience, like, although like I do feel comfortable and I've been exposed to being a performance driven individual, the
Hmm.
nerves and, definitely still, I still have to practice. I still study.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? That doesn't change after, 20 years of doing this. It doesn't change.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I used to tell people all the time, or I still tell people all the time, if you're going to get up in front of people, if you're going to do any kind of presentation, you have to be okay with the sound of your own voice. You know how, like,
Yes.
you hear your voice, you're the only person speaking, and it's like dead quiet. You can hear a pin drop, and people who are uncomfortable with the sound of their own voice and nothing else, they're like, it's like, oh man, it's the craziest thing. And so anyway, so I want to know, like, um how did you choose? So like you were in like recruiting, and then you were at a staffing agency. How
And I
did
got
you
into learning
get
development.
to learning development, and then how did you get to Skechers? Because a lot of people out there, I know, are interested in like the career shift, but are also interested in like, how do you get to work for a big, like, well-known company?
Yeah, so I started out in recruiting, and I was like, okay, recruiting, falls under the umbrella of human resources. You have recruiting, you have
Yeah.
payroll,
Yeah.
employee relations, and so forth. And then, I never knew about learning and development. In fact, when I came into learning development, it was called training and development. It's now
Mhm.
grown into it's L&D. After all these
Okay.
years. But it was how I got into learning development, how I got into retail was from, my manager. She's actually my director. She said, like, hey, you know, there's only so far that we can go, in your career path. And I see some skill sets. I saw an opening with Long's Drugs. I'm not sure if you remember them. They were
Yeah.
they were a West Coast based, pharmacy, multi-billion-dollar entity way back
Yeah.
then. Um, and she said, like, I saw an opening for a training coordinator position. I'm like, what's that? And she's it's pretty much like HR training. And, I think that would be something. I was like, oh, are you okay with me applying for that? She's like, yeah, I really think it would be something, it's
Oh.
in LA. And I applied for it. I went through a 5 interview process,
Mhm.
and I was hired. And so that's kind of how, one, I got into the retail side, two, how I got into, training and eventually learning and development.
Yeah, that's a good thing that you brought up too. Like side notes, a boss like that, that's a good boss. When you have a
A
leader,
really good boss.
when you have leadership who are not afraid to help you find a better fit for you, help you, progress in your career rather than to try to hold you back. And it's like, oh, we need you in this spot only, you know, that's really good leadership.
Yeah, no, I will never forget her. She was very instrumental, early on in my career. That kind of
Yeah.
got me into, she saw something in me that I didn't know I had,
Hmm.
but she was able to, from the outside, and, and she wasn't going to hold me back. And she gave me this opportunity. And, looking back, I didn't know what I was doing. I was like, wow, why is there so many interviews? you know, like, that's how young and naive I was. I was like,
Yeah.
what's going on here? Why does it take me so long? Like, I should just stay here. But she
Mhm.
was so excited, when I got that opportunity. And even going into the opportunity, I definitely felt out of place because it was super professional. It was an actual human resource, position.
Mhm.
And everyone that was on the team had like 15, 20 years on me.
Oh man.
Oh yeah, I was young, and I didn't have this full beard. I had a baby face, so you can only imagine. They're like, "Who hired you?" I asked the person. She actually was a peer, at once. I was like, "Hey, you were my last interview. Like, were you the one that really said like?" It's like, "Yeah." She's like, "I loved your personality, and I knew that you were super green, and I knew that we could mold you and utilize
Oh.
your personality." So we needed someone who was engaging. We needed someone who could really light up the room. I'm like, you saw that in me, I'm like, thank you for the opportunity, and we're still friends to this day. She's retired as
Oh,
of
that's
now.
cool.
Like I told you, when I joined Long's Drugs, this training, they've had this training team for like 20 years already. And that was back in the early
Oh,
2000s.
wow. Yeah.
So I still, everything that I learned from that whole team, and all the tips, the hard constructive feedback
Yeah.
on like my body language and my the way I project. And I still, and I share that with my team now,
Nice.
all that
Yeah.
wisdom, 20 years later.
Yeah.
I'm still sharing, and it's still the thing is, it still applies. That's what I love about learning development, is a lot of the
Mhm.
principles, that is established, learning and development professionals and specialists. If you want to go in this career path, it's consistent. So we're talking about 20 years ago when I kind of broke into this industry,
Yeah.
and it's still consistent. So if you're looking for something where it's consistent and principles still apply, but obviously personality and modernization, we can talk about AI. I mean, those are just additional things that come with modernization, but the
Mhm.
principles still apply. So I definitely
Yeah.
still see myself as valid, as value added,
Yeah.
in the learning and development. So this career path is still exciting. It's still nimble, even though it's been a concept for many, many years. And now corporate America, like Skechers, for example, um, you know, the learning and development team is only 3 years old, and Skechers
Oh,
is 31 years old. So that should tell
wow.
you how long it's taken, a lot of Fortune 500 companies to really get on the bandwagon of learning and development, because it almost seems kind of like a soft skill, like, oh yeah, we can teach people how to communicate, we can teach people how to be better leaders. Why don't we just put that on the senior managers, or let's just put that on the VPs. But there is something to be said
Man,
when a company
interesting.
when people invest in specialists, especially in learning development. Our specialty isn't to know how to operate a forklift, or how to manufacture a Skechers shoe, if you will.
Yeah.
Our job is to take hard concepts and to learn it, go out there on the floor and kind of see, like, then walk me through this process, and then
Hmm.
make it make sense to someone that has no idea about Skechers or about our process here at the distribution center.
Hmm.
And then give them those tools and framework in bite-sized, manageable learning, you know, pieces where they can be successful. And there's a lot, I'm kind of just talking high level, but there's a lot that
Yeah.
goes into a lot of hard work and discipline, a lot of meetings with stakeholders, and
Yeah.
really getting them to get the buy-in. Because if the stakeholders don't buy in, all I'm doing is hearing myself talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. No, that's true. So, so you do like you help, like you do onboarding, right? So you're teaching people how, like, hey, this is the company, this is what we do. You give them the high level like overview, right? What other types of things do you do as like learning development, like
Oh,
levels and
just
all that?
just to be clear, like, yes, onboarding is part of it, but
Mhm.
there is technical training. So, we have certain warehouse softwares,
Oh
that we
yeah.
use. So you actually have to be, think about the tools that the participants will need. You're going to have to actually go out there and learn it.
Hmm.
So the learning curve is a little longer because, like, warehouse management it's a huge process, and
Hmm.
each department is ran differently. So depending on the need, you can have the technical aspect. Then you have the soft skills like leadership, which is my passion, and that's
Yeah.
where you talk about competencies like emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
like decision making, delegating effectively. Those are things that a lot of people assume that as you mature in your leadership skills, that it just kind of comes about. No,
No.
no,
No.
no.
No, I can't tell you how many, like, being military for 20 years and civilian for 10 years, I can't tell you how many times, like, how many, like, really great leaders I served under and worked under, there's like a handful. The rest were like trying to figure things out and like didn't some of them were like really, it's like, oh my gosh, it'd be great if you went to some kind of leadership training because we're all over here in the dark and this is terrible, like situations like that. But yeah, no, you don't learn those things typically on the fly. You have to have some kind of focused training, and the people who really grab hold of that and really buy into that are the best leaders that I've ever had.
Right. And it does take a lot of self-awareness, and then also having good mentors.
Yeah, yeah,
Say that you work for a VP, and the VP also grew up in this environment. They started out as a temp, and through the years they just kind of moved up, and they haven't worked anywhere else.
hmm,
And so leadership is this arbitrary, like leadership. Like, what does that mean? Well, there's leadership at Skechers, and then there's leadership, for
yeah,
example.
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Oh
And
yeah,
you- say, so we have a demographic who has, put in, a good 20, 25 years, where they kind of grew up with
yeah,
Skechers, and we're only 31 years old. And
yeah.
now they're coming to these high level leadership development classes, and they're kind of like, oh, wait, what?
Hmm.
And they're realizing that, oh, I've been leading backwards, or my thought, they're going through this learning curve and this change process, and they're starting to question everything, and we're still trying to motivate them, like, oh no, we're going to put you through this, through this learning, process, and we're going to
Hmm.
support you. We're going to give you resources. We're going to give you quick reference guides, and we're
Yeah,
still available after the fact. We can't expect you to be a good decision maker after a 2-hour class,
yeah, yeah.
but we're going to support you, you know?
Yeah. It's interesting. So this type of stuff is my wife Angela. This is like her passion, right?
Okay.
She provides this same type of stuff for. She's worked for like churches in been in Mississippi and Tennessee, and she's like provided the same type of leadership and development. But really, it people have to buy in. People don't buy in. It's just like she's just talking, right? So I think you guys would have a really good conversation, really long conversation. I think if you talked about that, but we're not going to do that here because she doesn't want to be on camera. But we can talk about it later. But so if there's somebody who's thinking about like learning and development, what is the career path look like?
So definitely getting into a human resource background. Like starting out with recruiting. Recruiting is like an easy way to kind of get in because recruitment is one of the pillars of hiring the right people, knowing how to ask the right questions, ensuring that you're meeting the needs of hiring stakeholders, like, and you have to be an effective communicator. I think if
Mhm.
you are in a recruiting capacity, or that can kind of lead, because that was my process. That's how I kind of
Mhm.
fell into, and then I had a good mentor that pointed it out, saying like, hey, have you ever thought about training? And
Mhm.
to me, training was, I really didn't understand what training was until I was actually in a training and development or learning and development process,
Mhm.
and understanding a lot that takes in. So if you are a recruiter or even an HR business partner, where you kind of do like general type of HR, that type of background would be great. Sales, if you come from sales and say that you're from outside sales doing business to business, and you're able to, how to get the attention of a C-level decision maker, and you know how to navigate through that you know quickly, that would that type of skill set and confidence level, and being strategic, that would be a good background for someone that wants to try out learning and development.
Interesting. That's interesting. Man, so okay, I want to thank you for being on the show, and I want to thank you for like talking about your career field. It was interesting because like I knew some of the things like I train people in software, like that's one of the aspects of my job, but I don't do all the things you do, and it was interesting to hear it and like where you came from and all that. But like when you froze up in the very beginning, I was saying that when you took me to your parents' house in I don't know, I thought it was Escondido, but
Was it
like
Vista? Was it Vista?
oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And then like we went down to Oceanside. You're like, oh, I'm gonna show you the house that was on Top Gun. You remember that?
Yes. Yes.
And I was telling everybody you were like off. You were trying to get back on, but I was like, yeah, he took me to see the house where like it was Kelly McGillis's house in the movie, and so I was like, hey, I know that house. It's like iconic,
It's it,
man.
it's it's still there, but they moved it because now I'm not sure if the last time you were in Oceanside, but now there's a bunch of hotels and it's
What?
very different. Yeah, so they actually moved the house. It's in front of this hotel, right?
Oh
It
my
still
gosh.
overlooks the Oceanside Pier,
Yeah.
but
Oh, that's so weird. Yeah, I was telling people when you were off, and I was telling people about it. I was like, "Oh yeah, he's showing me the house in Top Gun," and I was like, "Back then we only had one Top Gun. I know there's two now. Back then there was only one." But yeah, that was it's so crazy, man. So crazy. Oh, so back to I want to take it back way back in the beginning of your story. What is the most interesting thing that you ever dug up when you were in Samoa?
it was a old village. We had to hike up. I don't know how long. It was just if you ever been to the South Pacific, it's American Samoa is located right below the equator, so it's
Mhm.
always hot. It's humid. Um,
There's a reason why you're brown. I know. My
yeah,
people are also from near the equator.
Yeah, that's why we're brown. Like you have to definitely have some melanin to protect you from,
From the sun.
the
Oh,
heat and the sun and then the humidity. But I remember it was like, oh my, and we had to, take machetes and we had to, cut through a trail.
you're
It's
like
very
Indiana
tough.
Jones, man.
Literally just like Indiana Jones. It's jungle. It's overgrown, so we found a grave. So the grave that we found, like, they were giants. Like, I want to
Oh,
say, like,
what?
the grave that this guy probably was like 8 to 9 feet.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
And people think Samoans are big now. I tell
So our
people all the time when
ancestors
they
were,
say, people are like, "Hey, are you Samoan?" I said, "Bro, I went to school with Samoans, and like they were this size when they were like 9 years old. Get out of here."
I want to say like I want to say we're part Nephilim, whatever. Either way,
That's so
because when I
crazy,
saw that,
man.
I'm like, is this a real grave? I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
really was. It was and it had a Samoan house, and it had where they cooked in the umu or underground.
yeah.
So I would say that was like the most interesting dig. I mean, I grew so
Wow.
much respect. Our culture is 3,000 years old, so it's older than the Bible, than
Mm,
than Christianity. So that
yeah,
should kind of tell you. Where we come from. So we came from Southeast Asia, like Taiwan, and we kind of
yeah.
went through the
Through the
Philippines,
Philippines.
and
Yeah,
so
I know the
we're
story, man.
cousins. We're cousins.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, back like 300 generations,
We
whatever
have
it
a
is.
common ancestor. We have a common ancestor somewhere down there.
Right, the Austronesian
But yeah,
peoples.
that was the most interesting, dig.
That's so cool,
And
man. That's so
yeah,
cool. I thought you were going to say, I found the heart of Tafiti. No, I'm joking. But
I mean,
yeah, no,
finding that huge body was like, oh my gosh.
that's
I don't
crazy.
remember how old it was, but I mean, it was at least 1,000
Yeah.
years old.
Yeah, things
So
that that's things you'll never find in the Philippines is huge people who are from there.
that's funny.
The Aboriginal people of the Philippines, like including the Aita people, they look kind of like the Aboriginals in Australia and like Papua New
Yep.
Guinea, but they are very, very small. And the
Yeah.
Spanish called them the negritos, which is literally small black men. And so they're like very small. And so yeah, they're still there and they are small. And they're the indigenous peoples. It's pretty cool.
And I know we
So
share the same DNA. We share the same DNA because we have a common ancestor.
yeah, that's pretty cool, man. Yeah, I was sharing my like ancestry DNA thing with my sister. And I was like, "Hey, what does yours look like?" And like we've been told for years that we have like Spanish ancestry. I know a lot of Filipinos say that, but the reason why most Filipinos have a Spanish surname is because the Catholic Church came through and they're like, "Hey, this is the catalog of Spanish surnames," and then they baptized people and gave them those names.
Give
And
you
it doesn't
Christian
mean
names.
yeah, it does not mean that they have Spanish ancestry, but we were told, like my grandmother used to tell me, "Oh, my dad was, Spanish." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." I saw one picture of him. But like looking at my ancestry, and I have like very very small percentage from like southern China and eastern China, and that's like the migration of the people is like through Taiwan, right? And then I actually have like 6% from Spain, Basque, and Portugal. And I was like, "Hey, my great grandfather or great great, I don't know, something like that." So I love that. I love the history type stuff. I love all that genealogy stuff. When I was in high school, I don't know if I ever told you, but when I was in high school, I wanted to be an archaeologist. I wanted to be like Indiana Jones, but
I did not know that, but I can
but
definitely
I
see
couldn't.
that.
But I couldn't stay in school, man. I failed. I failed. Then I went to the Philippines and I failed, and I came
I'm
back and I
surprised.
failed, and I joined the
I'm
Air
surprised.
Force.
Yeah, I'm surprised I made it through because I told my mom I wanted to, join the military, and she's like, "Oh heck no, you're going to school."
But your brother joined the
You're
military.
so yeah, and I was so mad. I was like, "So you're okay with Robert joining the army?" And it's like, "Well, he doesn't want to be in school." I'm like, but you're going to
Oh,
finish school. I'm
oh,
like,
that's the cultural expectation again. There you go. It's being the
yep.
oldest. I was the youngest too, so I don't know. My parents were like, yeah, do what you got to do.
Well,
Just like stop eating all our food. You got to go make some money.
and you done well for yourself. So
Yeah, I'm surely blessed, and I've had a lot of people pour into me. So, um, but hey, you know what? I'm gonna go ahead and kill the stream. But don't go anywhere. I want to talk to you in the studio. But for everybody
okay.
else, yeah, everybody else, thanks so much for tuning in and hearing about Eric's journey, Chuck's journey, and just, normally at this time I go, oh yeah, I forgot to look on the schedule and see who's next. And guess what? I forgot to look on the schedule and see who's next. But keep an eye out for the posts because I'll let you know who's next on the show. Until then, have a great week. Peace.